The auditorium sat in silence, the grand piano shining under the stage lights like a forbidden treasure. For years, whispers had followed one girl, the girl who wasn't allowed to touch the piano. Teachers dismissed her, students mocked her, and the rules seemed carved in stone. That instrument wasn't for her. But on this day, everything was about to change. When her fingers finally touched the keys, the air seemed to shatter. Notes poured out with such power and beauty that jaws dropped, hearts raced, and every prejudice in the room crumbled. What they once tried to silence was now impossible to ignore, and by the end of her performance, nobody would ever look at her the same way again. The day began like any other in the quiet suburban neighborhood where Maya lived, though the air always seemed heavier for her. At 15, she had grown accustomed to the invisible barriers that seemed to follow her wherever she went. She loved music more than anything, its gentle rhythm, its ability to make her feel seen when the world often ignored her. Yet at her school, music was a luxury, a privilege often controlled by rules that didn't make sense. And for Maya, the ultimate symbol of that injustice was the grand piano in the school auditorium, a gleaming, polished monument to dreams she wasn't allowed to chase. From the first day she had stepped foot into the school's music hall, the piano called to her. She could hear it in her dreams, feel it under her fingers even when the lid remained closed. The music teacher, a rigid figure with a clipboard always in hand, had said with a cold, final tone, "Maya, that instrument isn't for you." There was no explanation, only the heavy weight of authority and the unspoken boundaries of a school that seemed to measure students by more than talent. At first, Maya thought it was a mistake, a misunderstanding that could be corrected with time. She tried to follow the rules, keeping her distance, practicing on her small keyboard at home, and performing for her family when she could. But every day, the longing grew stronger, and the whispers from classmates, some curious, some cruel, reminded her that the denial wasn't just an oversight. It was deliberate. Despite the rejection, Maya's love for the piano became a secret obsession. She would sit in the back row of the auditorium during rehearsals, tracing the keys with her eyes, imagining the songs she might play. Her imagination transformed the silence into symphonies. She pictured herself filling the room with music so beautiful that even the sternest teacher would be forced to listen. That fantasy became her refuge, a place where the injustice could not reach her. Maya's family noticed her obsession, though they did not understand the depth of it. Her mother worried that her daughter spent too much time alone, absorbed in thoughts and melodies no one else could hear. Her father, a man who had grown up with his own share of obstacles, often offered quiet encouragement, but avoided confronting the school directly. He believed in resilience, in earning the right to be heard, but even he could see how the school's rules seemed unreasonably cruel. The classmates were not gentle. Some tried to tempt her into breaking the rules, teasing her about what might happen if she dared to touch the piano. Others ignored her entirely, reinforcing the sense of invisibility that Maya often carried. But there were a few who quietly admired her determination, who whispered words of encouragement in the hallways, warning her that the world could be cruel, but also capable of being stunned by someone who refused to stay silent. Maya's school was preparing for its annual showcase, a high-profile event that drew parents, alumni, and local dignitaries. The piano would be at the center of the auditorium, its polished black surface reflecting the bright stage lights, beckoning to every student who had ever dreamed of performing. And this year something was different. Rumors circulated about new music pieces and exceptional talents. But no one mentioned Maya, except in hushed conversations filled with doubt, skepticism, or, sometimes, admiration. She spent countless nights at home, practicing alone, fingers dancing over a modest keyboard that could not compare to the grandeur of the auditorium piano. Every melody she played was an act of defiance, a whisper of hope that one day she would be able to prove herself. Her compositions grew more intricate, her understanding of harmony deepened, and her love for the instrument became almost sacred. Music was no longer just a passion, it was a lifeline. The week of the showcase, tension ran through the school like electricity. Students were anxious, teachers were busy, and the auditorium hummed with anticipation. Maya walked past the piano each day, heart thudding, hands trembling with longing. The music teacher's eyes followed her with the same cold authority, reminding her silently of the barrier she could not cross. Every glance at the piano became a mix of temptation and torment. Then, a small spark of hope emerged. During a brief conversation with a visiting alumnus, someone who had once been barred from performing themselves, Maya learned that there might be a way to petition for a chance to play. The alumnus spoke in careful tones, suggesting that extraordinary talent, combined with courage, could bend even the strictest rules. Maya felt a surge of determination. The idea of performing on the grand piano in front of the entire school and its visitors became irresistible. But the stakes were high. One wrong move could lead to humiliation, expulsion from the showcase, or worse, the shattering of a dream she had nurtured for years. Her mind raced with possibilities. She imagined the moment when she could finally sit at the piano. The audience hushed, every eye upon her. The fear of being caught, of being denied again, mingled with the thrill of imagining the first note striking the air, pure and unyielding. The piano had become a symbol of every injustice she had faced. The whispers, the dismissals, the subtle prejudices that suggested she did not belong. Yet it had also become a beacon, a test of her courage and resolve. In the quiet of her bedroom, Maya practiced relentlessly, fingers gliding over the keys of her small instrument, as though preparing for battle. Every note she struck carried the weight of her frustration, her hope, and her unshakable desire to be recognized. Her compositions swirled with emotion, shifting from moments of sorrow to bursts of fiery determination. Music became her language, and she spoke it with a power that words could never convey. As the showcase approached, Maya's anxiety grew, but so did her determination. She had reached the precipice where courage met opportunity. The piano awaited her, and so did the moment that could change everything. Every day she passed it in the auditorium, her reflection mirrored in its glossy surface, reminding her that she was closer than ever to the impossible. The night before the showcase, she could hardly sleep. She imagined every possible outcome: success, failure, rejection, applause, and every scenario carried a weight of emotion so intense it left her breathless. Yet beneath all the fear and anticipation there was a quiet certainty. No matter what happened, the music inside her could not be silenced. It was only a matter of time before the world heard it. And so, Maya stepped into the auditorium the next morning, heart pounding, hands trembling, and eyes fixed on the piano she had been denied for so long. The stage was set, the audience filling the room, the bright lights illuminating every polished surface. The music teacher's gaze fell upon her, sharp and unyielding. But Maya felt something shift inside her. A quiet, unwavering resolve. This was her moment, the moment that could either shatter her or prove, once and for all, that her talent and her spirit could not be denied. The morning of the showcase arrived with a strange mix of stillness and electric tension. The halls of the school were bustling with students rehearsing their performances, parents finding their seats, and teachers coordinating final touches. Yet for Maya, every sound of laughter, every applause echoing from the gymnasium, only heightened the sense of isolation. She walked past the auditorium, glancing at the grand piano that had been off-limits for so long. Its polished black surface gleamed under the bright lights, each reflection a reminder of the invisible chains that had held her back. The music teacher, Mr. Hawthorne, was already on the stage, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the room with a sharpness that could cut glass. His presence was suffocating, a constant reminder that rules were rules, and Maya's dreams were a delicate, forbidden flame. He had made it clear countless times that the piano was not for her, that the showcase was a stage for those he deemed ready, and she was not among them. Yet, despite his rigid authority, a faint crack had begun to appear in the walls of his judgment. Whispers of Maya's talent had begun circulating among the students, carried in secret like a forbidden melody. In the hours leading up to the showcase, Maya's nerves were a storm of conflicting emotions. She practiced on her small keyboard in the empty music room, fingers flying over the keys with precision born of years of secret dedication. Each note rang with a defiance she could barely contain. She imagined herself at the grand piano, every key under her touch resonating with the power of her frustration, her hope, and her unwavering love for music. The fantasy was intoxicating, but the reality of stepping into the spotlight and facing Mr. Hawthorne's disapproval was terrifying. Other students noticed the tension radiating from her. Some whispered, "She's going to try it anyway, isn't she?" Others laughed, convinced that her boldness would be her downfall. But there were a few who watched in quiet admiration, recognizing the courage it took to even consider touching an instrument that had been forbidden. These silent supporters became an invisible audience, their unspoken encouragement giving Maya a small but significant boost of confidence. As the first performances began, the auditorium swelled with applause. The students who had been allowed to play the piano dazzled with their technical skill, but their performances felt hollow to Maya. She had spent countless hours creating music that came not just from technique, but from emotion, from a deep, almost spiritual connection to every note. She could hear the potential in every chord, the layers of meaning that had been forbidden to her. And with each passing performance, the desire to play only grew stronger, a drumbeat in her chest that could not be silenced. During a brief break, Maya wandered back to the edge of the stage, peering at the grand piano from a distance. Its glossy surface reflected her image, and for a moment she imagined herself sitting there, fingers poised over the keys, ready to unleash everything she had kept hidden. Her heart pounded with both fear and anticipation. She could almost hear the music rising within her, a storm of emotion waiting to break free. The piano seemed to call her name, daring her to challenge the rules, to defy the expectations that had confined her for so long. A small accident provided the first crack in the barrier that had kept her away. One of the performers, a boy who had been practicing nearby, stumbled over a scale and sent a sheet of music fluttering across the floor. Maya instinctively moved to catch it, her hand brushing the edge of the grand piano. For a heartbeat she froze, feeling the cold, smooth keys beneath her fingers. A jolt of electricity ran through her. She pulled back quickly, heart racing, but the sensation lingered. It was as if the piano had acknowledged her, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. Word of the incident spread quietly, carried by curious eyes and whispered comments. Some students speculated that Maya was reckless. Others sensed something more, a tension that could not be ignored. Mr. Hawthorne noticed her near the piano but said nothing. Perhaps he saw the spark in her eyes, a determination that he could not easily dismiss. Or perhaps he was merely preoccupied with the other performers. Either way, the seed of possibility had been planted. Maya had touched the forbidden piano, if only for a moment, and nothing would ever be the same. As the showcase continued, Maya's anxiety became almost unbearable. Every sound, every cheer, every clatter of keys on stage seemed amplified in her mind. She could feel the pulse of the auditorium, the collective anticipation, and the weight of every rule that had tried to confine her. Yet beneath the fear, a quiet fire burned, a certainty that her moment would come. She rehearsed the opening chords of her composition in her mind, imagining the swell of emotion that would rise and fall with each note. The music was alive inside her, and she could no longer ignore its demand to be heard. Maya's chance came unexpectedly. One of the scheduled performers fell ill, leaving a sudden gap in the program. The auditorium buzzed with confusion, and Mr. Hawthorne looked around, searching for a replacement. A hush fell over the crowd as whispers spread. Someone would have to fill the spot. Maya's stomach twisted with a mix of dread and anticipation. She could feel the gaze of everyone in the room, even those who hadn't yet noticed her presence. And then, quietly, she stepped forward, offering herself. The reaction was immediate. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the audience. Some students laughed, convinced she would be sent away. Others froze, sensing the audacity in her movement. Mr. Hawthorne's eyes widened, and for the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. Maya's heart raced, but she held her head high. She had prepared for this moment her entire life, and nothing, not rules, not skepticism, not fear, could stop her. She approached the piano, each step measured, deliberate, as if she were walking into a battlefield. The audience held its breath, sensing the tension, waiting for either triumph or disaster. When she reached the bench, she paused, hands hovering over the keys. The silence was deafening. Every eye in the room was fixed on her, every heart holding its breath. And then, slowly, she pressed the first note. The sound was delicate, almost tentative, yet it carried a depth that startled even her. The piano responded to her touch as if recognizing a long-lost partner. The audience leaned forward, captivated by the unexpected beauty. Maya's fingers moved with growing confidence, her music weaving a story of longing, defiance, and hope. Each note seemed to challenge the injustice that had tried to keep her away. Each chord a declaration of her presence, her talent, her undeniable right to be heard as she played. The rising tide of emotion was impossible to ignore. Some students covered their mouths in shock. Teachers exchanged glances of disbelief, and even Mr. Hawthorne seemed caught between authority and awe. The notes soared, cascaded, and then softened, creating a rhythm that resonated with every person in the room. Maya was no longer just a girl barred from the piano. She was a force of nature, transforming the auditorium with music that demanded attention, respect, and reverence. But the tension was far from over. Midway through her performance, a subtle challenge emerged. One of the accompanists, previously scheduled to perform a duet, hesitated at the wings, unsure of whether to intervene. Another teacher whispered something to Mr. Hawthorne, who shook his head, torn between enforcing the rules and witnessing the impossible unfolding before him. The uncertainty added a new layer of suspense, as if the very walls of the auditorium were holding their breath, waiting to see whether Maya's audacity would be punished or celebrated. Every crescendo, every delicate pause heightened the drama. The music itself seemed to narrate her struggle, each note a word in a story of defiance, courage, and artistry. The audience was spellbound. Parents, alumni, and students alike could not tear their eyes away. Maya had taken what was forbidden and transformed it into an undeniable testament to her talent. The piano, once a symbol of exclusion, now became a bridge between her dreams and reality. As the final notes approached, a wave of anticipation swept through the room. Would the audience erupt in applause? Would Mr. Hawthorne intervene at the last second? Would the rules that had held her back for so long finally assert themselves? The suspense was almost unbearable, every heartbeat echoing with the potential for triumph or catastrophe. Maya's fingers hovered over the keys, and in that suspended moment, it seemed as though time itself waited to see what would happen next. Then, as if in response to her courage, the final chord resonated, filling the auditorium with a sound so pure and powerful that it left a tangible silence in its wake. The spellbound audience held its breath, and for a heartbeat nobody moved, nobody spoke. Maya had completed her performance, defying expectation, authority, and prejudice, but the consequences were still unknown. The rising action had reached its peak. The storm had broken, but the fallout, the reckoning, was yet to come. The final chord lingered in the auditorium, a resonant echo that seemed to hang in the air, refusing to dissipate. Maya sat frozen for a heartbeat, fingers poised above the keys, catching her breath and letting the weight of what she had just achieved settle. The audience remained still, a collective moment suspended between disbelief and awe. Time itself seemed to pause. The girl who had been forbidden from touching the piano had not only played, she had commanded it. She had taken the instrument that had symbolized exclusion, prejudice, and authority, and transformed it into a vessel for her voice, her talent, and her unyielding spirit. And then, as if the spell could not hold any longer, the room erupted. Applause thundered through the auditorium, growing louder with each second. Some rose to their feet instinctively, unable to contain their astonishment. Others, frozen in shock, slowly allowed themselves to be carried along by the force of her performance. Maya's heart pounded as the reality of the moment crashed over her. She had done the impossible. She had broken through the barrier that had defined her for years, and now the consequences, whatever they might be, loomed like a storm on the horizon. Mr. Hawthorne was the first to move. His eyes, wide with disbelief, locked on Maya as he took tentative steps toward the piano. The authority that had always defined him, the rigid rules that had dictated who could perform and who could not, seemed to crumble beneath the undeniable truth of what had just occurred. He cleared his throat, a tight, shaky sound that carried across the room. and for a moment Maya feared he would punish her publicly, humiliate her for her audacity, or demand she leave the stage immediately. But he did not. Instead, his gaze softened, tinged with an emotion Maya could not quite name. Respect, shock, perhaps even a reluctant admiration. Whispers spread like wildfire. Did she just? She played it perfectly. I can't believe he's not stopping her. Students exchanged incredulous glances. Parents leaned forward in their seats, eyes wide, phones raised to capture the impossible. Even the visiting alumni, who had once encouraged Maya in secret, were stunned, murmuring in astonishment at the power and precision of her performance. The energy in the room shifted, electric and uncontainable, as everyone realized that the girl who had been silenced, who had been barred from her rightful place, had taken control of her destiny. Maya's fingers hovered over the final keys for a moment, savoring the tension, letting the silence that followed her crescendo speak for itself. And then she played the last note, a sustained, perfect chord that seemed to reverberate in the bones of everyone present. The sound was triumphant yet tender, defiant yet graceful, a perfect distillation of the struggle, the injustice, and the sheer willpower that had brought her to this moment. The audience erupted again, louder, more frenzied, unable to contain the emotional impact of what they had witnessed. But the climax was far from over. A few students, previously vocal critics or skeptics, now approached her cautiously, faces a mix of awe and guilt. Some murmured apologies, others offered grudging praise, and a few simply stared, unable to find words. The social hierarchy that had marginalized Maya for years was fracturing in real time, shifting under the undeniable weight of her performance. Her courage had challenged assumptions, exposed biases, and forced even the most rigid authority figures to reconsider their perceptions. Then came the unexpected confrontation. One of the most vocal critics, a popular student who had openly mocked her for months, stepped onto the stage, fuming. He opened his mouth to speak, presumably to chastise her, but the words faltered as he took in the room. Every eye was on him, but the energy had shifted irreversibly. Maya's calm presence, her unwavering poise, contrasted sharply with his bristling arrogance. He realized in that moment that she had won not just the performance, but the moral high ground. The humiliation that he had intended for her now threatened to rebound upon himself. The tension was almost unbearable. The auditorium seemed to hold its collective breath as the confrontation played out, a silent theater of power, emotion, and justice. Maya remained seated at the piano, fingers resting lightly on the keys, her gaze steady and unwavering. She did not need to speak. The music had already spoken for her. The critic, confronted with the undeniable truth of her talent and the overwhelming approval of the audience, faltered, flushed with anger and embarrassment. Without a word, he turned and left, a symbol of defeat, not by argument, but by the sheer force of artistry and courage. Even Mr. Hawthorne, who had spent years enforcing rules that seemed unbreakable, could no longer contain his reaction. He approached Maya slowly, eyes softened, face unreadable. For the first time, the weight of authority was tempered by recognition. He reached out, almost reluctantly, and gestured toward the piano. The unspoken message was clear. She belonged here. She had earned her place, not through compliance, not through favoritism, but through raw talent, relentless determination, and the courage to challenge the system that had tried to deny her. The climax reached its peak as applause continued to swell, echoing against the walls, reverberating in the hearts of everyone present. Tears glistened in the eyes of parents, students, and even teachers, who realized that what they had witnessed was more than just a performance. It was a transformation, a reclamation, a breaking of chains that had bound not just Maya, but the expectations and prejudices of the entire community. The music had done what words could not. It had revealed the truth, dismantled assumptions, and commanded respect. As Maya rose from the piano, the audience erupted into a standing ovation. The intensity of their reaction was overwhelming, a tidal wave of recognition, admiration, and shared emotion. It was the kind of response that would be remembered for years, a defining moment not just in her life, but in the life of the school. The girl who had been banned, silenced, and underestimated had not only played the piano, she had owned it, claimed it, and transformed it into a symbol of justice, courage, and artistry. Even in the chaos of the applause, there was a quiet acknowledgement among those who had doubted her. They had been wrong, utterly and completely. The rules that had seemed absolute were not enough to contain her spirit. The judgments that had been passed in whispers and pointed looks dissolved under the undeniable brilliance of her performance. For Maya, it was a moment of vindication, a long-awaited proof that her passion, dedication, and integrity could not be denied. The climax concluded not with a dramatic argument or loud confrontation, but with a subtle, irrevocable shift in perception. The audience's reaction, the quiet change in Mr. Hawthorne's demeanor, the humbled expressions of former critics, all spoke to the power of her achievement. Maya had transformed a moment of injustice into a triumph of talent and perseverance, and the impact would ripple far beyond the walls of the auditorium. As the echoes of applause faded, Maya stood alone for a moment, hands trembling, chest rising and falling with the force of emotion. She had faced fear, prejudice, and authority, and emerged victorious. The piano, once a symbol of restriction and denial, had become a mirror reflecting her courage, her artistry, and the indomitable force of a girl who refused to be silenced. The climax of her journey had arrived, leaving the audience stunned, inspired, and forever changed. And in that moment, Maya understood something profound. Victory was not simply in the notes she had played, but in the act of claiming her rightful place in a world that had tried to deny her. The piano had not just echoed her music, it had echoed her resilience, her determination, and her unshakable belief in herself. The stage was no longer a platform of restriction, it had become a sanctuary of expression, and Maya's voice would resonate far beyond that single, unforgettable performance. The applause lingered like a warm echo in the auditorium, fading slowly, but leaving behind an energy that seemed almost tangible. Maya stood at the center of the stage, chest rising and falling with relief, eyes glistening with the weight of what she had accomplished. She had faced every barrier, every whispered doubt, and every rule designed to keep her silent. And yet, she had not only survived, she had triumphed in a way that no one could ignore. The piano, once a symbol of exclusion and limitation, had become a testament to her talent, courage, and resilience. Word of her performance spread rapidly, first through the halls of the school, then beyond its walls. Social media buzzed with videos of her playing, capturing the sheer power and emotion of the music. Parents shared clips with friends, alumni, posted praise on platforms, and local news outlets took notice, drawn to the story of a girl who had defied unjust rules and risen above prejudice. Suddenly, Maya was no longer the invisible student, the one who had been dismissed and ignored. She was the girl who had changed the narrative entirely. Mr. Hawthorne, who had spent years enforcing rigid rules, was forced to confront his own biases. He had spent countless days assuming who was ready to perform, who deserved the piano and who did not. And yet here was Maya, proving all assumptions wrong. The change in him was subtle, but undeniable. He began to adjust the school's policies, opening doors for students previously overlooked, and encouraging talent regardless of preconceived notions. His respect for Maya was not just for her music, but for the courage it had taken to challenge the system. Even the students who had mocked or doubted her could not hide their astonishment. Some offered reluctant apologies, others were left humbled, grappling with the realization that the assumptions they had made about talent and opportunity were flawed. The social dynamics within the school began to shift. Maya, once at the margins, became a symbol of perseverance and excellence. Students looked at her not just with admiration, but with a renewed understanding of the power of determination and the courage to defy limitations. For Maya, the aftermath was transformative. The sense of validation was profound, not only because she had played the piano, but because she had claimed her rightful place in a world that had tried to silence her. She continued to practice relentlessly. Her love for music deepened by the recognition and opportunity now afforded to her. She began mentoring younger students, especially those who felt overlooked or underestimated, sharing not only her skills, but also the lesson that courage and persistence could break barriers. Her family was overwhelmed with pride. Her mother, once worried that Maya's obsession with the piano would isolate her further, now celebrated the determination and resilience that had led to such an extraordinary achievement. Her father, whose quiet encouragement had always been her anchor, felt a surge of relief and admiration, knowing that the years of unseen practice and dedication had culminated in a moment of undeniable triumph. For them, this was more than a performance. It was a vindication of hope, patience, and unwavering belief. The school itself began to change. Policies that had previously excluded certain students from participating fully in the music program were reviewed and revised. Auditions were made more inclusive and opportunities were expanded to encourage diversity of talent. Maya's performance had become a catalyst, forcing a community to examine its prejudices and reconsider what fairness, talent, and potential truly meant. Her music had not only entertained, it had transformed the culture around her. The broader impact extended beyond the school. Maya was invited to perform at community events, charity concerts, and local cultural gatherings. Each performance reinforced the lesson that courage and perseverance could overcome systemic barriers. Her story became an inspiration to countless young people, particularly those who had been told no without explanation. Maya's journey illustrated that talent alone was not enough. It was the combination of skill, resilience, and courage to challenge limitations that created lasting change. And yet, the most profound impact was internal. Maya had learned that her worth was not determined by others' approval or restrictions. She had discovered a strength within herself that no rule, no prejudice, no barrier could suppress. The piano had been the battleground, but the victory was in her confidence, her self-belief, and the realization that she could claim her place in the world through persistence and courage. The fear that had once held her back was replaced by a sense of empowerment that would carry her through every challenge to come. The final lesson of her journey was simple, but profound. The world often imposes arbitrary limits, decides who is allowed to succeed, and defines the rules of inclusion and exclusion. But talent, dedication, and courage have a power that cannot be ignored. Maya's performance was a reminder that boundaries exist to be challenged, that systems of exclusion can be transformed, and that the human spirit, when fueled by passion and perseverance, is unstoppable. Her music had spoken a language far beyond words, delivering a message of hope, justice, and the triumph of resilience over prejudice. Years later, as Maya reflected on that day, she realized that the true victory was not the applause, the recognition, or even the changes in school policy. The real triumph was the discovery of her own voice, the knowledge that she could stand against injustice, and the understanding that her actions could inspire others to do the same. The piano had become a symbol, not just of music, but of courage, opportunity, and transformation. Maya's story was carried forward in countless retellings by students, teachers, parents, and even strangers who heard of her defiance and talent. It became a reminder that one act of bravery, one refusal to accept unfair limits, could create ripples far beyond the immediate moment. She had faced rules, authority, and doubt, and emerged not just victorious but transformed. And in doing so, she had left an indelible mark on everyone who witnessed her journey. In the end, Maya learned that every note she had played carried more than music. It carried her history, her struggle, and her hope for a world where talent and determination could not be ignored. The girl who had once been banned from the piano had not only reclaimed it, but had redefined what it meant to belong, to be heard, and to triumph against injustice. Her story was a testament to the enduring power of courage, passion and perseverance, the truth that no barrier, no prejudice, and no rule could ever silence a determined heart. And so, the piano, once a symbol of exclusion, became a monument to possibility, a reminder that anyone brave enough to claim their rightful place could inspire change, touch hearts, and leave the world irrevocably better than they found it. Maya walked away from the stage that day with more than recognition. She carried a legacy of courage, proof that even in the face of injustice, a single voice, a single act of defiance, could resonate across an entire community and even beyond.